In this video, we're going to practice a little bit with lighting in Unity. Specifically, we're looking for really efficient lighting. We're going to be going over how to set up a scene for baked lighting, working with ProBuilder as well as an imported mesh, just so that you know how to import it properly. So before you actually begin, you need a model to bring in. And it can just be something very simple like this. This is just meant, I called it room. It's a 2 meter by 2 meter floor. The wall is about 2 meters high, which is a tiny bit of definition, just so we can kind of see the light working on it. There is, the bottom is missing and the back is missing. So just a real simple model so that we can practice lighting this and how to import it correctly. So I'm going to kind of show you how to export this first. It's not unwrapped since we're not worrying too much about texturing. If we open up the unwrap, it is kind of a giant mess, and that's fine because we're just going to place some solid colors on it in Unity. So I prefer to use, if you're using Maya, the game exporter. I would recommend that you get into the habit of using this. It's a little bit easier when you're doing game stuff. A lot of times when you're modeling for games, you're going to be doing a lot of back and forth. Like you're going to be in Maya and you're going to be tweaking it, exporting it, checking it, tweaking it, exporting it, and checking it. And the nice thing is this does stay open as a window, so you can kind of keep this in a second monitor. So it's, easy just to click that export button when you're ready to export if you're doing a lot of back and forth. To set this up correctly, we're going to change it from export all to export selection because we don't need to export everything. It'll export all of these objects. And if you have multiple objects in your file, which usually you do end up doing that, we don't need to export the cameras. We don't need to export everything. I just want to export what's selected. Underneath settings, we don't want to export it to a single file. We do want to export it to multiple files. Again, we're exporting one thing now, but this is just to make sure that when we are exporting, let's say we had like 2 different floors and 2 different walls, we could select all of those at once and export them with one button click. The way it names these files is based on how you named it in the outliner. So you do want to make sure that it's named nicely in your outliner. We are then going to tell it where to export out. And the nice thing is we could export, we can export this directly into Unity since Unity doesn't really care. It's not like Unreal where that might make it really annoyed. We can export this right into our project. So I have just a very simple, I made in URP, like a basic, just like the simple URP core project, like the 3D one with nothing in it. And I did import in ProBuilder because I'm going to make a real quick ProBuilder thing in here too for this demo, and you need to do that too. So if we need to figure out where to put this, let me create a models folder to import these into. Kind of a little trick. I'm going to right click in here and I'm going to show show in Explorer. And it'll show me where on my computer this folder is. So I can then click up in here, copy this address so that when I'm exporting it out, I can just paste it right into here. So I don't have to hunt around to figure out where this folder is. There we go. And now I'm going to export this out. It's just a simple model. Again, I like the game exporter because then, like I said, I usually am working back and forth between the two, so I can just keep that open if I need it and just select what I need and then click export without having to fumble into a bunch of different menus. So let's go back to Unity. So I see my room. It's just this very basic, there it is. But there are some things we need to do to this in order for it to take the light correctly. So we're going to go over to the import settings. Usually when you click on it, it's here by default. And underneath the model, what we want to turn on, one, unless we built or are planning to do our own geometry colliders, like we have a different collider mesh or we're going to build it directly in there, we can just generate our colliders Maybe if you want to clean it up later, but you need to walk around in it now, that's fine. We can just do that. But the important one is down here underneath generate light map UVs. We're going to talk a little bit about that in a minute when we start doing our lighting, but we need to make sure that this is checked on and we hit apply. Some other things you could consider doing is underneath rig, we're not importing a rig. Underneath animation, we are not importing animation, so we might as well check those off. That's technically the better way to do things for environments, is if you're not importing those in, you should just make sure they're checked off. We don't currently have a material for that, but we can make one real quick if we do want to assign a specific material for that. Let's go ahead and make a materials folder. I'll just make 2 real quick materials, just so we have something to work with. We'll do, let's do, I'm going to do gray. Actually, let's just do all gray. That way we can really see what the light is doing on things. So we're going to do just like a medium light gray material. Oop, didn't take that. There we go. And let's go back to our model and let's assign it gray. There we go. All right, now I can drop it in my scene. And we have this. So I do need to take out this global volume, and I do want to take out the directional light because I kind of want to start with nothing. I'm going to kind of go over how to set this up. Before we do lighting though, let's do our quick Pro Builder room that we need. I already put it in the project, so if you need to go ahead and do that, feel free. Pause it and do that. Let's go to Pro Builder. They slightly changed this on me, so just be aware that Pro Builder does work differently in Unity 6. It might take you a moment to get used to it with how they build it, but we just need a simple room, maybe something like this big. I'm not too you know, as long as it's like person size. We do need to make sure we're building things to scale because Unity does lighting based on to scale. So we need to make sure that, let's see, we need to make sure that we build it to the right size, or else it starts getting really weird. Like the light doesn't act correctly. Sorry, I'm gonna shape settings. That's not what I need. Like I said, they moved this all on me, so I have to refigure out some of this again. Okay, so I moved it over here, but I guess the way this works, it's gonna take a minute if you haven't gotten used to Pro Builder. I guess you turn it on here, and you can start like selecting things, but then you can do your selection up here. Like you have to actually select these tools, and then you can select like your face and stuff like that, because I do need to make this a little bit bigger. Like this. I do need to flip them because it's meant to be kind of like an interior space. So let me select all the faces. And let me see if I can figure this out. Right click, flip face normals. There we go. I do want to cut a hole in the ceiling too. So we're going to select that top face. We're going to extrude face, but let's move to the scale. Scale it in. And it doesn't really matter. I just want to be able to have a hole in the ceiling. So this is what you should start with. We have our imported one, and we have this thing, which is our interior space. Let's name this one interior. We just need these so that we can see the light interacting differently with this. Let's also go ahead and retexture this with our gray. There we go. And we can begin. I think I'm going to also take the Pro Builder mesh. We'll leave it as is. So something to keep in mind too, we need to make sure that we're setting our items correctly in the scene. So we imported things correctly, but we do need to set some stuff in the scene. But I'm going to do things the wrong way first, just so that you can see what happens when you encounter it. So get to the spot, and then we're going to continue on with the actual lighting portion of it. Okay, let's go to the lighting panel. If you don't have this, it's underneath Window, Rendering, Lighting. And this is kind of where we're going to be working in. So the Scenes panel, you're going to spend a lot of time in here. This is where we actually set up our baking. You probably don't have a lighting setting asset, and it's important to make these. Usually I just pop them in where my scene is so that, let's call it lighting demo. And you can use these in multiple scenes. This is just kind of like your setup for like how your lights are, so that you don't have to kind of keep doing them over and over again, but sometimes you might have scenes that are a little bit different. So this is the important part. I'm going to show you how to set this so that when we're lighting, it goes easier, like it doesn't take too long. I'm certain that you've probably tried to maybe do something like this and you set it up and it's like, oh my gosh, it's going to take like hours to do that. When we're just trying to kind of get it set up initially, we don't need to have those really long bakes. So we are going to change the lighting mode from shadow mask to baked indirect. In my opinion, that one tends to work a little bit better. Like that's kind of like a good happy medium of a lighting mode. We're going to change the light mapper from progressive CPU to the GPU. The GPU will work faster. It's not as accurate as a CPU bake, but it'll crunch through it quicker. You might end up with some artifacts, but usually those, like you can tell it's an artifact from just using the GPU and you can ignore that. When you are done with your level and you're ready to do your final bake, that's when you would turn it back to the CPU and bump up your levels. So down here, this direct, indirect, and environment samples, they're set to these things. It's way too high for what we're doing. I usually, when I'm just trying to get it working, I set the direct samples to 8, the indirect samples to 16, and the environment samples to 16. Again, the results might not be amazing results. They honestly tend to turn out pretty good, but if you do get some like artifact issues, you can usually try to look around those, like kind of ignore them, and it can get fixed when you do your final bake. Then right here, light map compression, we're just going to set it to normal quality. We're going to make sure ambient occlusion is not checked. We're going to change directional mode to non-directional. This is so that I haven't checked it in a while, but before it honestly doesn't do anything. It's meant so that your normal maps will be visible even if you're using baked lights, because technically normal maps aren't visible in baked lights. They're only visible underneath directional lights, and this is supposed to fix that. But I've honestly, unless they've fixed it for Unreal 6, it minimally makes a difference, and it's not worth doing an extra, it adds extra bakes to that. So we're going to take that down. And that should be good for our basic setup. This is usually what I work with when I'm doing my lighting. And then when you're done, you can bump it up a little bit higher so that you can do your final bake when you feel that you're comfortable with this. So let's go then over to environment. We do want to make some changes to this. Specifically, I do want to take the skybox off. I don't want to work with a skybox right now, so I'm just going to select none. The reason is I want you to try to light this with nothing, so that let me take that to black, so that you can kind of practice setting this up. So environment lighting, we're going to change that to color. We're going to make that black. And environment reflections, we're going to set to custom. And so that we finally have a scene that is absolutely dark. And this is a good place to start. Make sure you get it set up this way so that we can kind of talk about what lights actually do. Like this is a great way to see how lights affect everything. Okay, so first, and this is going to not work, and that's fine because I want to show you what to do if things don't work. So we think we're good to go. We've taken it all off. We don't have any lights in our room. We took out the skybox, so we're completely done. What I usually like to work with first is underneath this environment light, this ambient color. If you are doing a fully exterior scene, you could set this to your skybox. If you are using like a specific skybox. And what this is meant to be is kind of like the really low kind of lighting. So it's kind of like the really, really dim lights that you would use so that your stuff isn't just completely black. So, again, use some color theory with this. This is kind of like lighting up your shadows. So depending on kind of like that look you're going for, like I'm going to kind of actually do it more on like a bluey kind of purple. And, we don't want it bright. That's not the purpose of this. This isn't, we don't want it too saturated, just, something a little bit on the dim side. And then if we, once we're good to go, what we're supposed to do is we're supposed to just come over here and click generate lights. And we click on it and it didn't do anything. In fact, if we go over to the baked light maps, we can see that nothing was generated. Like this is kind of the key that tells us that something is wrong. Like if we try to bake it and we don't see any light maps, or we don't see things, or things are too dark. This is because while we did import this in to say make a light map, we didn't tell it in the scene that it needs a light map. So every time you place something in the scene, we have to make sure that we're telling it that it's static. Static means it's not going to move. Dynamic means it moves. So if, environment, it should be most of the time static because we're not moving it around. Where like a character or something would never be static because it's moving. So we shouldn't bake lighting onto characters. So we need to make sure that we do set this as static. Once we click this on, we can see that we suddenly have information about, how it's going to act in the light map. And, for now, this is fine. Same thing over here with our Pro Builder. Let's make sure we set that to static. Notice too, watch this. So this is the Pro Builder. It has this thing right here. If we click the static on, we can see it automatically turns that on for us. And we do get like that lighting information underneath the mesh renderer. Okay, so let's go back here and we're gonna click generate lighting and let's see if we finally get some stuff. Should take longer than a second. So yeah, we can see we're generating baked lights. I'll probably be pausing the video between takes of this. So if you see kind of jump, it's because I'm not going to make you watch it bake. All right, and we can see we now have a light map. There's not anything really super interesting on it. I think our stuff is a little bit too low, but we can view it. So if we click on view, we can see our room. So what this is, a light map is a second unwrap on your models. Anything that needs a baked map needs a second unwrap. Back in the day, this used to be kind of the job of like the interns, is we would toss them the models and say, please make the light map unwraps for these. Thank you. Because it is a little bit tedious. We can't have any overlapping UVs. But the nice thing is that whole, where we click that button, generate light map UVs, is that now the program will do it for us. You'll get some purists who say you should still do your own light maps. It's fine for what we're doing. You might need to, at some point, if you're doing something super crazy make your own light map, but we can see that it did it for us, and this is what we got, but we don't really see anything on there. So let's go back to our color. I'm going to boost this. I'm surprised it's not working more. I hope I didn't forget a setting. I'm not getting any errors. So let's do a test. I'm going to bump it up to white and then generate it again and see what we get. Oh, there we go. We're starting to get something. I will say Unity lighting tends to be tweaked between each version, and I swear they just kind of move things around on me and make things more difficult. So if I kind of don't quite get something right away, it's just me probably looking for it. Okay, there we go. So we can see that we get it streaming in because it's meant to be lighting as if it's coming from the environment. So if you have a fully encased interior space, like we didn't have this cut out, we wouldn't get this lighting in here because it has to come in through a hole exposed to the outside world. So depending on your space, there we go, it may or may not be useful to do this. Yeah, this one's a lot brighter. We can see since it's exposed, we get this really bright. And this is what I was talking about, some artifacts. That's fine because that's kind of like we dropped our resolution down, so that's okay. Now that I know it is actually working, let's get this color a little bit better. We're going to do maybe something like that again. Let's see how that goes. I guess you can kind of see it. It's really dim. But that's okay. We don't need it to be super bright. Let me just go a little bit higher. Something like that. It's a little bit bright for me. I mean, we can really see it on the outside. I'm just going to keep it as this. We barely even see it on the inside now, and that's fine. Its purpose is just to kind of take out the darkest of shadows because it's just kind of like an overall light. So play around with that, see what you get. If we look back at our baked light map, we can definitely see it on there now. Okay, let's start adding in some lights. The first thing I want to add is a directional light. The way I tend to light is I do it one little step at a time. I take out all the lights and then I add, you know, start with my ambient, like that's this stuff, and tweak it to what I need. Then I'll add in like my main light if I need one. Because directional lights, if you remember from the reading, are not super useful if you have an interior space. Because again, it works where, you know, its direction is all over the place. And unless you have holes cut out, you know, they're not, and you can only have one per scene, it's not super helpful for us. But let's go ahead and add one anyway, just to play with it. So directional light, it's important to change the mode to baked. For what we're doing right now, we're just doing baked lights. We're not doing real time and we're not doing mixed. The one important thing, and this trips me up a lot, I don't know why by default this is off, but remember that shadow type. Let's change it to actually take shadows. And, you know, that's a little bit bright of a color. Let's do like a nice kind of warm sunlight. We could change the intensity if we needed to, and let's bake it out. We could change the angle a little if we want to as well. Let's kind of rotate it around. Maybe something like that. And we'll do our bake again. And there we go. So we can see it's working pretty good on our exterior, like that fully exterior, but in here, it's only coming in through that window. So directional lights, good for exteriors, can be useful sometimes for interiors, but only if you're cutting out stuff for it. So make sure you do have, for this demo, a directional light setup. With it set up correctly to bake. Actually it's a little bit too bright for me. Let's desaturate that a little bit and bake it again. There we go. And let's move on. The next light we're going to look at is going to be the point light. These are very helpful it's, you know, one point in space kind of pushed outwards, but we do need to make sure that we are setting this up to be baked. Intensity, drop that down. I'm going to make it look like we have an incandescent interior light, so something really warm. And I am going to change the range down because I don't want it to affect the whole space. Maybe something like a corner kind of light. There's like a lamp sitting over here. So we'd have like a desk lamp sitting on a table. There you go. Shadow type, no shadows. Sometimes you might want no shadows on something like this. Like if it's just kind of, you know, meant to be a little bit more ambient-y. Like if you are putting it in a lamp or just for the wall, you might not need shadows on, but let's turn shadows on for this anyway. We'll do another quick bake. Let's see, there we go. And the reason why it's running so fast, again, is because we switched it over to the GPU and we dropped down all of those settings. So if you're running it and it is not going this slow, or it's not going this fast, go back and rewatch the part about setting up the scene correctly, because that's going to be your friend to make it go a lot faster. So yeah, ambient, this is good, again, for one point of light extending out in all directions. Specifically like a light bulb. Like think of a light bulb. Be mindful of, you know, using these where if you feel like you are, and I see this a lot in student work, like, oh, I need to light up this whole wall. So I do one light, duplicate it, a light, duplicate it, a light. And we have like this array of point lights. That's not really the best way to accomplish that. There is a better light. And that's what I'm going to show you next. I'm going to, let's see, there we go. Add underneath lights, this area light. This takes a moment to get used to how to use it, but it is such an effective light. I wish more students would play with these. I light a lot of things with area lights. But I would definitely take a moment to play with the area light to figure out how it works, like change some settings, you know, see what the deal is with this. But the important thing is that area lights are only baked. We cannot set an area light. You know, if you wanted to use a mixed light or a dynamic light, you can't with these. These are baked only. The way that this works is it works more like an LED panel light. So if you've ever, you know, think of those giant panels, or maybe like a ceiling light, like you would see in a classroom, like the big fluorescent lights. It emits light in the direction you're pointing at in the shape and size of this. So if we needed to light this whole back wall, you know, because that's how I mentioned, like putting that array of point lights is not the right way to do it. It's these panel lights. So we're going to position it. Let's pretend that this is more of like a TV. You know how TVs sometimes have like a bluish kind of glow to it? So let's see if we can play with that to get like that blue TV glow going. We can even change the shape. We can do a disc shape if we need to, but I'm going to stick with the rectangular shape. And we can even play with that width and height so that we project it the way that we need to, like the shape. And the intensity and the range are things that you're going to have to kind of play with yourself to see how they work. So let's just start with this. Let's just bake this out. Cast shadows is on, and see what happens with this intensity and multipliers. So let's go and bake this. And we can see we're getting kind of like that glow. Do you see that? Where it's like a, you know, that blue going that way, but maybe it's a little too big for what we're trying to accomplish. Let me actually make it smaller. And that's why I said kind of play with this and see what it does. And let's jump up the intensity to like a 2. I've used this also, like if you've ever been in a like a fancy like a mall or like a dentist office, and they have like the slightly vaulted ceilings, and they have like the lights that are kind of on almost like a crown molding pointed upwards, so it illuminates the ceiling. This is the kind of light that we'd use pointing up at the ceiling. Is it done yet? It didn't seem to do too much. Let's move it a little bit closer, and we're gonna just bump that intensity up a crazy amount. Like, don't be scared to, if you're not quite sure what a light is doing, oh, let's do this. So if I'm like, I don't know if this is working or if I'm getting what I need, I put it on like a very crazy color, and I'll just go, bump this up really high. Like, let's do a 100 on this fluorescent pink and see what we get. Oh my goodness. There we go. We can see what's going on a lot better. I kind of like too how these work, where you can even see the distinct line of where the panel is. So it's a little bit much, I can always change that color back to what I want it. And then start taking the intensity down. Let's make it again. Let's actually make it smaller. Let's make it like a 0.5 and 0.5, like the panel size, and you'll see what it does. We can even make it, not square. Like, what if we made it 0.5, 0.1? So it's almost like a long light. We can get some interesting sort of effects. This room's a little bit small to really kind of get that look to it, but let's make it even. Let's do this. Let's make it back to 0.5, and we will drop the intensity to like a 50. We're getting kind of like that nice sort of glow. So yeah, panel lights, these area lights, they're your friends. Like, you can make some really nice lighting effects with these. Don't do just a bunch of point lights. Like, that's not the approach that you want to go with this. Practice using panel lights instead. Unreal has a very similar light. I don't remember if it's called an area light or a panel light. It's something like that. Very similar. I am not going to go over how to use the spotlights. You should basically never use the spotlight. This goes for Unity or Unreal unless you are literally making a spotlight. So like a street light that needs to have a very focused light pointed. Don't try to light spaces with spotlights unless it actually is a spotlight. The whole point of that is it's kind of like an angled light that gets that sort of look to it. You should be primarily lighting your spaces with the directional light, the point light, and area lights, and the spotlight is only if you really need that really focused beam of light. Otherwise, these other lights are going to get you pretty far. So we have our imported stuff. We practiced importing it correctly. We saw what happens with an exterior space. We practice, using the directional light, the point light, the area light, and setting up our scene correct. So that's kind of what I want you to do for the lab or the lecture assignment is show me a exterior, with the correct settings, an interior with your, two lights, basically everything I did in this video. I want to see that you have your scene set up like this so that you can always just refer to this when you set up a new scene. So yeah, if you've just kind of followed along through this tutorial, that's all that we were planning to do. I want you to bring this to class. Just submit a screenshot of your interior like this, just so I have something to put a grade in. But I just want you have to bring the project to class for fully grade, because I want to open up your project with you and see that you did set everything correctly. So if there are problems, we can go through them. So yeah, make sure you do bake it before you bring it to class. And I don't care if you use plastic or not for this. This is just a real quick demo. So you could just zip it and bring it if you really want to.